Welcome to the lecture series on reinforcement learning and the brain. In this introduction, I will pose the questions. So reinforcement learning has a long tradition, and this field has essentially two different routes. One is a formal mathematical one, it's optimization in Markov decision models. But the other one, the other big driver, has been the question of biology. How does learning happen in biology? How can a child learn to play piano, a youth learning to play ping pong, or a dog learning to make little artistic tricks? So, what are the questions for today? Well, what elements of reinforcement learning are bioplausible, for one, and for two, can the brain implement really reinforcement learning? Let us start with an involved reinforcement learning structure, the actor-critic structure, more precisely the advantage actor-critic, which is a reinforcement learning with a TD signal. So there are two parts. There's the critic part, which has to estimate the value of the current state. The state is what gets into the first layer of a neural network here. The V-value calculates then the TD error, and this influences the transmission in the actor, which has different outputs, actions like advance or push the king to the left if are in chess and so forth. So this TD error is not just the reward, it's the momentary reward, win or lose, and then you compare it with the difference of two values. This is the TD error. And now the question is, how does the algorithm work for updating the weights? There are two types of weights. They are the weights in the actor, they are the weights in the critic. Now all these weights are updated proportional to delta, which is this TD error. Then the next line is the derivative of the value, which is the update rule for the parameters in the critic. The following line is the derivative of the log policy. That's the update rule for the derivative, the update rule for the parameters in the actor. And the Z's are eligibility traces, the actual updates of the weights in the critic, of the parameters theta in the actor, depend on the delta and also on these eligibility traces Z. And now, before we start, let's just review this algorithm and ask what is the relation of this specific advantage actor-critic algorithm to other policy gradient algorithms. So this is the learning rule, which I just described. Here's again the definition of the delta. This is the first set of eligibility traces, the second set of eligibility traces. This is the actual update rule for the weights W of the critic and the actual update rule for the parameters theta in the actor. Now the first question is the following claim. We get the advantage actor-critic without eligibility trace if we set lambda W equal to lambda theta equal to 0. Now, where do these lambdas appear? They appear here. So think for a moment. And the answer is yes, this is indeed the case, because if we set lambda to 0, then, for example, for the actor, we get the standard update of the policy gradient. So we have a first relation between the advantage actor-critic with eligibility traces and the one without. Now, second claim, we get reinforced without baseline, but with eligibility trace, if we replace delta just by the reward in the next time step. Again, think about it. So this is a statement about the first line in this little red boxed algorithm. Is this true? And the answer is yes, this is true. We can specialize to reinforce without baseline, but with eligibility trace if you set delta equal to the reward. The third claim is we get reinforced without baseline and without eligibility trace if we set delta equal to R, where R is the return, the reward in the next time step, discounted reward in the following time step, and so forth. Okay? And then the final point is reinforce without baseline and without eligibility trace has many terms that are proportional to these derivatives of the policy. And the answer is, well, the first one is wrong and the second one is correct. It's not just the momentary update of the momentary derivative of policy at time t, but it's really, we have to calculate many of these terms. Okay, so that's the background. So we have relations of the advantage actor-critic with eligibility trace to the one without eligibility trace. We have a relation to something without baseline but with eligibility trace, and the reinforced algorithm without baseline and without eligibility trace. In other words, it's a superclass of algorithms, and different other algorithms are special cases. Why am I interested in this statement? Well, learning rules of other online policy grading models are special cases of this algorithm. And that allows us now to say, okay, let's look at the algorithm in the red box. We take this as a starting point to discuss the relation with the brain. And then a specific question is, can such a learning rule, as indicated in the red box, be implemented in the brain? Now that's my first question. The second question is, an actor-critic could, for example, represent a full environment. Here it's a 2D environment. We could use Gaussian basis functions. We could have actor neurons that form a ring that indicate different directions of movement that can represent a policy map. Then on the critic side, we could just have neurons that represent the value map. And from this value map, we would calculate together with the reward the TD error. And then this is an actor-critic structure to learn to find a goal, the green goal here hidden behind the red barriers. And the question I ask is, can this structure be implemented in the brain, or is it just something good for algorithms on a computer? So what we try in this series of lectures is we start with the learning rule, we look at algorithms, and the red boxed algorithm that I have shown is an interesting candidate. And we ask, how are these algorithms, and there are many of these, many special cases, related to the brain? And moreover, this leads us to a more general statement. Well, maybe we don't need a von Neumann architecture. Can we have something non-von Neumann, something completely distributed that does computing? And if so, is there a special kind of hardware, maybe neural-like hardware, neuromorphic hardware, that would implement this? So we are interested in what's sometimes called brain-style computing. So the questions I would like to ask in this lecture are, does the brain implement reinforcement learning algorithms? Can the brain implement an actor-critic structure? Furthermore, can we learn without backprop? What would be applications of brain-style computing? And in the context of these questions, we'll discover properties such as local learning rules or Heppian learning rule or three-factor learning rule. And there are big fields of research that are interested in these questions. There's a whole field called computational neuroscience or theoretical neuroscience, trying to understand what's going on in the brain in terms of learning rules. There's cognitive neuroscience, where you test learning in humans or animals. There's neuroeconomics. That's a field where people are interested how people react to money in terms of reward. And finally, reward learning is closely related to addiction, and there's clinical neuroscience of addiction, and reward learning is also the basis of addiction to social networks.